Welcome to the Sales Readiness Podcast, brought to you by SBI. Each episode features an unfiltered conversation between our host, SBI's Managing Director, Ray Makela, and an industry expert about strategies, skills, and solutions that drive sales performance to the next level. These conversations are packed with expert advice, real-world examples, and practical tips to help sales enablement leaders to close deals, lead teams, and outperform the competition. In this episode, Ray is joined by Christina, Brady, CEO and co-founder of Luster.ai, to explore the evolution of go-to-market strategies and the critical role of proficiency measurement in driving revenue performance. Together, they look into the future of sales enablement, the flaws in traditional training approaches, and how AI-driven proficiency assessments are reshaping commercial success.
All right. Hey, Christina, thanks so much for joining us today. I am so excited for this conversation. I've been a follower and fan of yours for quite some time, and I'm really excited about what you're doing at Luster. So we're going to dive in and pull back the covers a little bit, and I hope get a glimpse into what's going on in your world and how this is all evolving. But maybe we could start and just have you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are, and then we'll talk a little bit more about Luster.
Oh, thank you so much. I am thrilled and honored to be here. It's always a lot of fun to be able to talk through this stuff with like-minded individuals who are somewhat solving similar challenges to what we are in very different and super complementary ways. So the honor is mine. Oh my gosh, my background. So I am what I would call an 18-year go-to-market veteran. I am currently the CEO and one of the co-founders of Luster that we will dive into. But I started my career as a full cycle account executive before there were BDRs, even before there were really account managers, especially from a quota carrying standpoint. And over the last couple of decades, I've worked my way up across multiple different technology companies, hyperscaling companies, and different elements of first leadership and then executive and C-suite leadership. In addition to that, for the last 15 years, I've been a trainer. So I am certified in 7 different methodologies. I've trained over 30,000 revenue professionals. I've spoken at over 150 SKOs, and I've been an advisor to over 100 different startups. And so I have just been rooted in the idea of go-to-market building and evolution and performance, and really kind of how skills and talent are the atomic nucleus as to whether or not your company is going to be successful or not. And the issues that I found with the measurement of that were the catalyst to me saying, nobody is solving this, so I am going to. And that's what got me kind of where I am.
Wow. Well, great introduction. And yeah, I think you checked the why are you credible to speak to this topic today? and also I love the fact that, we both carried a bag and run teams
Yes.
and kind of bring that experience, right, to kind of the enablement and training side. So maybe we can dive in a little bit deeper into Luster.ai and the platform, and then talk a little bit about what challenge are you solving in the marketplace? Why is this different, and how are you going to market with this?
Yeah. One of the biggest issues that I saw in my last role as an executive sales leader is every team, including my own, relied on my reps, my CSMs, making revenue impacting mistakes on actual customer calls in order for me to identify that there was an issue, right? We inherently, every company does this. We make our customers collateral damage to our inability to properly measure proficiency. And then even if you could properly measure proficiency, we don't have the tools, the technology, the people, sometimes the acumen or the budget to actually solve that problem for every individual. And so every company relies on our KPIs are declining, we're not hitting our quota, our churn is going up. And so we're going to do one size fits all fire drill training. Right? We're going to train everybody on everything all the time. We're going to check the box, and then we're going to wait and see, based again on the KPIs that were declining, are the KPIs still declining, or are they going up and to the right? And the fact that we rely on actively stepping on landmines to identify that one is there was lunacy to me. And so I started trying to find a solution that would allow me to predict revenue impacting mistakes before reps made them, which meant that I had to have a way to objectively measure their proficiency. and one didn't exist. The closest that I could get was hiring consultants to come in or folks to subjectively analyze my existing customer calls, but that just doesn't go far enough and it doesn't fix the problem. And so what's interesting about Luster is we currently today we are an AI practice platform that uses the practice sessions to derive a skill proficiency map for your customer facing employees based on what's important for your organization, where are they proficient, where are they deficient, and then we've built predictive technology to take that proficiency map, look at the actual customer interactions that they have coming up on their calendar, predict where revenue impacting mistake is about to happen, and then proactively close those skill gaps through a variety of AI practice, AI content, AI training, or coaching prescriptions for the human coachers and enablers. And so while that's just our first product, I knew that if I was going to be able to objectively measure proficiency, I had to do it without relying it being on eroding our customer base. And so that's actually why we built an AI practice platform. We did not set out to build a role play tool and then stumble upon the fact that we have all of this data. We started with, we want to get this data. How do we get it without impacting our customers? And so we sort of backed into building our AI practice, AI role play platform.
Wow, that's interesting. And yeah, a different way to come at it other than, hey, there's some cool technology out there. What, how can we apply
we
that?
can. Exactly.
Right. And as you know, there are others also doing that, but not taking your unique perspective. And I think that's really refreshing. One of the things we see all the time, and I've used this with a number of clients, of the idea of practicing on our clients is really expensive. And, it's the most expensive way to do training when we get it wrong. And to your point, it's backward looking. So if we identify a gap through consulting or, maybe listening to a bunch of recordings and going back, then we're trying to fix what already happened in the future versus, to your point, leaning in on it. I love this idea of, predictive enablement as a service or as an offering. And can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, how does that pull together to identify those gaps and then serve something up that can help address it?
Yeah. Predictive enablement is something that we invented and we trademarked because it's this idea of the new way of enablement going forward that takes enablement practitioners and beyond any reasonable doubt takes them from being measured as a cost center to being measured as a revenue center. The hardest thing about being in enablement or training or learning or development or even coaching is it's so difficult to take the training that you do, the coaching that you do, the programming that you build, the collateral that you put together, and actually tie that collateral to a proficiency increase and thus the result. And so those individuals who are doing the meaningful work to up-level go-to-market teams can so rarely justify their work from a revenue-based standpoint. And so the ability for us to actually measure skill improvement and proficiency over time is huge and paramount in why we exist. And so predictive enablement has basically three core use cases. Use case number one is you think about all of the mistakes that are made with hiring and onboarding and ramp, simply because we only have the interview process to determine if this person is the right person for the role. And what do we have? We have their past performance, which we know is not indicative of current or future success. We have endorsements from people who are their best friends and people that they very much like. And then we have our subjective viewpoint based on our interview of them, which is usually more cultural versus tactical. And so to solve that in a predictive way, instead of doing the very traditional role play that you might do with a revenue employee, you have your employee actually practice in Luster before they're even hired, because you're able to measure then a proficiency map and know objectively, does this individual have the skills that we need walking in the door in order to be successful or not? And then from there, you go into onboarding, right? So we hire this person that has the critical skills that they said that they did, and now we've proven that they do. They come in the door, and now you look at prescriptive onboarding. One of the things that I consistently heard tension about as a revenue leader is that reps, CSMs, AMs, BDRs, SDRs never felt prepared to do the job after onboarding. And why? Because onboarding has to be a one size fits all. You have people from all walks of go to market sitting in a giant room, and you have to find a way to train all of them. Why? That's crazy. If you actually know the deficiencies of the individuals walking in the door, then you can actually prescribe onboarding to those individuals, and you can cut their ramp time in half by attacking the deficiencies, allowing them to practice instead of listening to calls or burning low-hanging fruit, and get them to revenue faster by making onboarding kinesthetic, right? In body. My onboarding is I was able to do 300 calls before I made a real call. And every call learned my behavior, focused on my deficiencies, trained and coached me along the way. And then my manager had a prescription for how to coach me to revenue faster. So predictive enablement when you're hiring people, right? Stop making bad hires. Predictive enablement for certifications. You've just trained your team on a brand new product, talk track, security infrastructure, whatever it may be. And the only way for you to determine if that's going to work or if they've ingrained that is, hey, go try it out on some customers. Why not? Instead, there's a way to certify to say everything that we learn in this organization, we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, again, proficiency before they go and now they are talking to customers. And then the third, and this is where predictive enablement really comes alive, is the everboarding use case. The everboarding use case is Luster is following me throughout my entire journey as a revenue producer. It understands my proficiencies, my deficiencies, my communication style, how I like to learn, and it knows exactly where I have to perform versus where I'm strong and where I am weak. And if it identifies a point of weakness that's about to show up on a call, not only can it proactively schedule a dress rehearsal for that call, but then eventually we'll be able to deliver you AI custom created content for a single rep, for a single call to prepare for a conversation, whether that's a battle card or persona training or reminders of questions to ask. So it turns into this idea of we can predict what's going to happen. Luster is the crystal ball. And the enablement piece of that is addressing a gap before it ever erodes revenue. So that was a really long response to a really big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, and you've thought a little bit about this, and I love that. And also, with your example of onboarding, I think that's such a great example because we often run into that question of, well, how do we know when we're done? Is it, well, they finished 90 days or they made it through this, god awful e-learning library, or, what is, or maybe they passed some sort of role play with their coach or manager or onboarding person, but that doesn't necessarily say they're client ready, where again, you can look across all of those folks and be able to determine what adequate or proficient looks like to go to market, right? To start taking calls. And if that's a week in, or if that's 6 weeks in, now we have a way to right size and really tailor it to the individual.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, speaking of the role play area specific, I mean, obviously video role play has been around for a while, even AI role play, but what are some of the things that you think clients are getting wrong about that, or struggling, maybe misconceptions they have, and how are you addressing it differently?
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing, if you put the product and the tech aside, right? Because especially for me, if I'm building a tool for revenue professionals, then that needs to be best in class, right? So you don't want to have an amazing value proposition with a lackluster user interface. that doesn't work. So that aside, and sort of feature to feature aside, the biggest thing that companies miss is the prescription. Why this role play right now? And it may not seem like that's that big of a deal, but it's the difference between traditional adoption for learning and development tools, including point solution AI role play, bordering around 12%. And then what we're actually seeing at Luster, which is 70%, much higher and a bigger lift in terms of the adoption. Now, why does that happen? You could say the product is great, blah, blah. It's none of that. It's none of that. You're hearing it from me.
Maybe
It
some
actually,
of it, but yeah.
like a little bit of that, but honestly, no, right? Because it's the prescription. So the best metaphor that I can draw is when I was growing up, I was a musician. I was a flute player. And my mom was a world famous musician as well. And so she knew the importance of consistent, measured practice. And every day she'd say, Christina, you have to practice. You got to do at least 30 minutes a day. And I'd be like, I don't want to practice. I don't want to practice. I'm a teenager. I want to do teenager things and I don't want to waste my time practicing. And she'd go, you got to do it. You got to practice. So I'd sit down, I'd pull out my flute, I'd look at my music and go, okay, practice what? I guess I'll do a couple of scales. I'll play a couple pieces of music that I know. What I'm really doing is suffering through 30 minutes of something that I don't want to be doing that doesn't feel valuable. I'm watching the clock tick down and I'm kind of putzing around and wasting my time. And that unfortunately feels so similar to the way that go-to-market teams train their people. This is the training that everyone has to go in and do. Pause what you are doing and go do the training because we have to make sure that all of you are trained. Same thing with a traditional role play. We've built all of these role plays for you. Everyone go in and do the role plays. Okay, now we go back to my example. I was a competitive flute player. When I had a competition coming up, my mom did not have to tell me to sit down and practice. She didn't have to tell me what to practice. I would proactively sit down, pull out the exact piece of music that I needed to perfect to win that competition, and I would practice it until it was perfect. The difference between those two things is the prescription. It is being able to measure the gap that I have against where I have to perform that coming up in the next few days and addressing that solution to my gap. That is the difference between building an empty gym for salespeople to work out in and actually having that personal trainer that says, this is exactly what you have to do right now. Because combating a skill gap that you may have that you don't have to perform against in the next 48 hours is a waste of time.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because I think it shines a spotlight on what's most important and creates a little bit of that competitiveness. As you said, if you had a competition, obviously there's motivation. I know from our training programs, when we implemented more robust gamification and leaderboards and really romance that. In fact, we have a webinar tomorrow that we're providing about rolling this out at scale. And I mean, one of our clients had 98% completion rates when they put up the scoreboard, when they managed that, when they socialized and celebrated, and also behind the scenes, they were calling out those who weren't. Right now, you have that healthy, and salespeople are competitive, and we saw a huge change. So it's not surprising. Just to build on that, I guess, what else are you measuring in terms of success? I mean, I know, maybe you're early with some of your clients, but in terms of seeing it move the needle, behavior change, and business results, what are you measuring to see if it's working?
Yeah. Across our initial subset of customers, we wanted to make sure that all of them were game for a little bit of A/B testing, right? So we had a pilot group and we had a control group. And we wanted those groups to be as equal in terms of skill, time frame, experience. Like we really wanted as holistic of a group as we possibly could, because we did not want a nice to have solution. We wanted to have a solution that meaningfully tracks to revenue results. And this is the former CRO speaking, right? If I'm going to buy a tool, especially right now, but really ever, this has to be something that gives me data that I don't have, that makes me a better leader and allows my teams to increase their proficiency in a measured way without me having to take up a lot of my human equity on my team. I want my executives operating as executives. So we knew that we had to be able to measure that. And so we took all of our customers that had been implemented for at least 6 weeks and got them all on board with doing a true A/B test, measuring very, very defined KPIs, namely ACV, the increase in pipeline generated per quarter, the conversion rates on closed won deals, the amount of opportunities created, the touch points to opportunity creation, and their ramp time. And what we saw as an average across all of those customers were a 32% higher ACV for Luster users, a 42% increase in pipeline generated quarter over quarter, a 2x higher conversion rate on closed won deals, a 26% increase in opportunities created, a 35% decrease in touch points to opportunity creation, so they're getting more efficient, and a 50% reduction in ramp time. And then the surprise metric that we got was a 38% improvement in overall proficiency with only 18 minutes of practice in Luster per week. And so this was like this knockdown average across organizations that showed us that we really had something. And that's when we kind of took off a little bit.
Wow. Well, yeah. And I'm glad I asked the question because
Me too.
and also, being able to start to quantify, okay, what does that mean to the business to have any one of those metrics, right? Improving the win rate, the average contract value, being able to ramp up quicker. I mean, we know that's a huge metric when we're talking about onboarding hundreds of people.
Yeah.
All of those start to drive real recognizable bookings and revenue. So
That's
yeah,
right.
that's really exciting. One of the other things I know people have struggled with is kind of getting people to use some of these cool tools that are out there, right? It's like, wow, that's great. And then, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I forgot that I have Copilot and Chat GPT and all these other things I can use. And even with video role play, going back years, it was a great tool, but you couldn't get people to use it, or you couldn't get managers to actually lean in and actually look at it and provide feedback and do the coaching, that they were supposed to. So how have you gotten around that? And, what's the solution across a larger sales team when you're trying to scale this?
Yeah. Across from kind of what we've already covered in terms of a tool that is meeting people where they are very proactively, the other big issue with so many tools is they don't meet reps in their flow of work. And so you are requiring them to pause what they are doing, go do something else, and then return to what they are doing. Every distraction takes at least 18 minutes to get back on track. So the amount of productivity that you lose in simply asking people to get out of their flow of work is really meaningful across a sales team. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a solution, aside from everything we already talked about in terms of juicing the adoption, that met people where they were. And so if your tool does not allow people to use it in their flow of work, your usage is going to go down, even if people want to use it, because it's not in front of them. So Luster has the capability to interact with, deep link, and also integrate with all of the tools that reps are already using. So you can deep link Luster simulations into an LMS learning path. You can deep link Luster simulations or skill drills into CMS content directly. You can schedule on their calendar. You can add it in Slack. You can text a link to them and they can actually role play in their car on the way to work. Anytime that you click on a link for a simulation with Luster, you don't have to log into the tool. It opens up like a Zoom window. You do the role play and everything is tracked on the back end. And so for a lot of our customers, we want to make sure that they find these simulations where they actually are. The two main places that we see deep linking are in a learning management system and then actually on the rep's calendar themselves, scheduling the role plays on their calendar, especially when you look at our everboarding use case, which is cloning a call that a rep has on their calendar and giving them a dress rehearsal, being able to proactively schedule that on their calendar. And that's something that Luster does, makes it so the I missed it. It's right on your calendar. And like, listen, I don't put it past any reps to miss the things that are on their calendars, but it helps with it. And then that works vice versa too. If there is content or collateral in your CMS, your LMS, your KMS that you want to make sure that reps are digesting before they practice, you can deep link those directly in Luster. And so it's us kind of becoming this go-to-market neural network with all of your systems and putting those areas of performance improvement where reps already are throughout the course of their day.
Wow. When I can see, as you know, we spend a lot of time enabling frontline managers and thinking about, okay, what do they need to do coaching and enabling their teams? And how is that role changing? And I think in the future world, like, yeah, you probably don't have time to go ride along with them, your reps, once a week and spending the whole day. But if we can listen to recordings, or better yet, get conversational intelligence about what came up. And then we have clients who are already starting to link to, oh, well, then I want access to that video to share what good looks like. And let's go refine that objection handling or that negotiation approach, but then go practice it right now. And then before our next one-on-one, let's see how that goes. And now you've really put it into that flow of work. And I love that.
That's right. Exactly. And going even one step further on that, it's important for coaches and sales managers to operate in their executive brain, and they get stuck in the weeds so much. And so we were the first tool of our type to even launch the capability to grade your existing calls in addition to your practice sessions against the same proficiency mapper that we've already built for you. And one of the things that's paramount is making sure that every manager gets a coaching report. So we send every manager a weekly, very comprehensive coaching report that outlines everyone on your team. Where are they proficient? Where are they deficient? And where do you need to coach them to prevent a revenue impacting mistake on these upcoming engagements? And so to your point, Is it the best use of manager time to tear through gong calls or chorus calls or Zoom calls or emails and try to subjectively identify where there's an issue? No. Sending them a summary of every customer or practice interaction that's happened that week, summarized the pain points that have been surfaced, and then looking at those pain points against where those reps are about to perform against those gaps again. Now we're talking about taking a manager and helping them be so tactical and effective.
Yeah, and that is exciting. And maybe that builds on to the next question, which I really wanted to get your take. I mean, you've obviously looked at AI enablement, looked at this role play space pretty closely. And as it evolves, some of the kind of things we're talking about. But what excites you looking ahead? Like, where is this going? And how do you see this whole idea of predictive enablement, kind of evolving?
It's so much more than point solution AI role play. And as I mentioned, it's never the thing that we set out to build. We set out to build a first of its kind predictive AI tool. And we have multiple ideas in terms of multiple different ways to utilize AI to really support go to market teams and bring them to the level of performance that prior no one saw possible. Like the mission of Luster is to change the way that go to market teams produce revenue forever. It's to turn enablement on its head and turn it into that revenue center and really empower enablement professionals to be able to say, this is the revenue impact that my work made beyond any discernible doubt. And that future looks like, yes, having a product that is AI role play, because it's one piece of the puzzle. But if you look at anybody that has a measured gap, there's what is the gap? And then what is the right way for me to correct that gap? Today, we can correct that gap with practice. But there's different types of learners. There's auditory learners, reading and writing learners, kinesthetic learners. And so we want to make sure that every single type of learner can have a solution for them. And so that means doing custom created AI practice sessions, building custom created content, putting together anything that is customized for an individual rep to be able to practice. You think about the world of how do we practice nonverbal conversations? How do I practice texting with a customer? How do I practice emailing with a customer? How do I understand how to speak to somebody on LinkedIn versus not? What are all the nuances of nonverbal communication? And how do I communicate with somebody nonverbally who communicates differently than I do? All of those things require an adequate measurement of the individual and then very, very targeted and customized solution to get them ready to do that. And so the reason why we started with this AI practice platform is the data that we get from that will literally power this entire company and platform and put us in a position where we are up-leveling go-to-market teams in a way that nobody ever has or thought of. And we're already doing that today. So the future for me of really unlocking the potential of people, like this is why I get up in the morning, is how many people
Right.
never get to the point of potential because they simply weren't given the chance to. And like, how much more can we enrich people's lives by just pulling their potential out, by just giving them a little bit more support than they have right now?
Wow. I mean, that is exciting. And, thinking this is not tied to some roadmap that was built a year and a half ago, right? That we're trying to check everything off so that we can
Right.
show that, we satisfied the requirements. But I mean, and you and I have been around this space for a bit, right? How long have we talked about meeting the learner where they are, right? And making it very relevant to them and in the flow of work. Yet it's been really hard. You're like, oh, you embed it in Salesforce, but then it gets lost and it's clunky, or there's a separate
Not
system
relevant
and
to me.
three other
Yeah.
systems you need to log into. Yeah. And so I love that idea and the fact that it continues to learn, right? Leveraging the AI component. So now it becomes even more relevant as you go.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, hey, I know we've spent some time here. I want to be sensitive to your schedule, but would love to talk a little bit about, if somebody's considering embarking on this journey, what guidance, what suggestions would you have? And, one, to get past the complexity, maybe their cost concerns, but, what are some of the best practices? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah. The first thing is when you're looking at something like AI, it's zippy, it's exciting, it's new. And I've heard so many people who are like, my job is to go out and figure out all of the AI tools that we should be buying. And I get that. It's exciting. you need to think first about all of the problems that you need to solve or the potential that you want to achieve, and then back into that solution and determine if AI is even the right answer. It goes back to the dichotomy of, do I buy a solution or do I build a solution? And AI can help you empower in both. So that's the first thing is,
Yep.
as exciting as it is to explore AI, and you absolutely should, always go back to the problem that you are solving, or you're going to burn a lot of cash on a lot of tools that honestly hurt your team's performance because you're distracting them. And if you distract people, they can't learn, they can't perform, you're killing your go-to-market team. The second thing is being very, very careful about the type of solution that you are buying. There is a very, very big difference between what we call a GPT wrapper and a custom-built, custom-coded, robust solution that is powered by AI. Two very, very different things. And there's not a lot of companies that are open and overt about that, right? Not a lot are like, no, we totally just built a UI on top of an LLM, and like that's our
Right.
product. Yet probably 90% of the tools out there today are exactly that. And it means they can build tech and technology very, very quickly. So they have the appearance of robustness, but they're not in control of their own product. They can build very quickly because there's nothing very, very deep. And that always kind of bites you in the end, unless you need a very, very simplistic point solution, which some people do, in which case those are great. So also understand and know the questions to ask. Is this a GPT wrapper? Is this an Anthropic wrapper? Is this a Mistral wrapper? Or is this a custom coded platform solution that is powered by AI, but not behooven or beholden to it? I will give you an example. Luster is built custom coded on top of a large language model, but we are not beholden to that large language model. We can swap that model out at any point in time without disrupting our product, because our custom coded product sits on top of that, right? And so there's a lot of questions that you need to learn to ask to really determine what kind of a tool is this. So that's my best advice off the cuff.
No, I love that. And I think, I mean, your point, the initial point really resonated with me, which we have that question a lot, like, hey, we need an AI strategy. And it's like, maybe you don't, right? You need a business strategy, which hopefully you already have. Now, how is AI enabling that? And what's the areas where you can really lean in versus thinking of it as this new shiny object that's, going to fix everything? But, let's get back to the problems you're solving and the jobs to be done, and then figure out how this can help enable that.
Yeah, exactly. Like what you just said should be like put on a banner. And when you're like, I'm sure they have a business plan. I don't know.
Well, right. Yeah.
I
If
don't
not,
know.
maybe we can help with that. But at any rate, I think that's a great place to wrap up today. Really appreciate your time and the chance to dig into this. As we said, there's probably a part 2. There's a lot more we can get into. But just before we wrap, how can people get a hold of you? What should they know? How can they reach out?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Christina Brady. You'll know my LinkedIn profile because it has lots of gems and little gemmy jams all over it, i.e. Luster. You can email me, Christina@Luster.ai, or you can always go on our website, Luster.ai, fill out a demo form. As the founder and CEO, I'm the one right now that insists on answering all of those because I love to interact with my prospects and customers. So lots of ways to get in touch with me or learn more about what we're building.
Outstanding. Well, I've enjoyed interacting with you today, and thank you very much for the time. Look forward to next time.
Thanks, Ray.
All right. Thanks, Christina. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to SBI's Sales Readiness Podcast with Managing Director Ray Makela hosting. Visit SBIgrowth.com to read SBI's latest research, join upcoming events, or learn about SBI's GTM and training services. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and connect with us on LinkedIn.